Hallo, liebe Zuschauerinnen und Zuschauer. Heute bedanken wir uns sehr herzlich beim Frankfurter Westendverlag für die Erlaubnis, die Aufzeichnung seiner Veranstaltung im Medienprojektzentrum Offener Kanal senden zu dürfen. Es handelt sich um ein Interview mit dem US-Amerikanischen Ökonomen Jeffrey Sachs. Dr. Jeffrey Sachs war zu Gast im Westendverlag und traf Schülerinnen und Schüler der Oberstufe des Gymnasiums Philippinum in Marburg. Sachs ist Wirtschaftswissenschaftler an der Columbia University in New York. Von 2002 bis 2018 war er Sonderberater der UNO-Generalsekretäre Kofi Annan, Ban Ki-moon und Antonio Guterres. Von 2002 bis 2006 war er Direktor des Projekts der UN zu den Millennium-Entwicklungszielen. Er ist Mitherausgeber des World Happiness Report. Wir wünschen Ihnen gute und interessante 50 Minuten.
Welcome here at Westendverlag, a publishing house in Germany, in Frankfurt, close to Frankfurt, in a small village called Neu-Isenburg. I'm very happy to be the presenter of this talk, which connects a very great guest here. We have Jeffrey Sachs here in our house today. Jeffrey is an economist from the United States who visits us here and gives a lot of interviews. And also I'm very happy to welcome students from a high school which is called Philippinum in Marburg. They are all in their senior year. They're all 18 and above, and they have questions for Jeffrey Sachs. So welcome, Jeffrey Sachs. Nice to have you here.
Thanks a lot. It's really great to meet all the students, so I'm very excited. It's a wonderful occasion.
Yeah, and we're very curious now what the students have to ask and what they want to know. So I'm welcoming Philip. Hi, Philip. Nice to have you here with Jeffrey Sachs at Westendverlag.
Hello, Mr. Sachs. My question for you is, I don't know how familiar you are with the German party AfD, but Mr. Musk is really supporting them. So I'm going to ask you, why is he doing that? Has he economic reasons, or is he just crazy?
Yeah, well, I don't really believe that we should get too much into the politics of another country. So I'm not crazy about Elon Musk intervening, let's say, in the German election right now, in a pretty visible way, especially because I call him kind of our prime minister. Actually, he's so influential in the new Trump administration that his intervention in German politics right now carries a lot of weight. He's not only the richest person in the world, not only sending spaceships up, not only building all sorts of amazing things, by the way, but he's politically very powerful right now. So I know him. We have a friendly relationship, but I haven't talked to him about this. I don't really know what he has in mind on this. My general advice is let the elections go on among the German people and the German voters, and don't intervene.
So are you scared of his influence, or are you looking positive about it?
Well, it's a very weird time in general in the world, but in the United States, at the inauguration, I think there were 10 tech giants with a combined net worth of $2 trillion or something absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, that's not healthy for society, actually. What happened in the United States is we really became a plutocracy. Over the last 40 years, our Supreme Court, which oversaw decisions about our election law, kept eliminating any limits on giving by corporations or by the super rich. And the Supreme Court made a really stupid argument, in my view. They said, well, this is just free speech, and it won't corrupt politics. Are you kidding? If you have billionaires that are giving huge amounts of money to politicians, you don't think that that corrupts politics? Of course it does. So the U.S. political system became deeply corrupt, but in its genius, in quotation marks, it's all legal. It's not illegal corruption, it's legal corruption. But it made the U.S. a plutocracy, meaning for both political parties, the main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they both look to their billionaire donors for what they're going to do. And, you know, most of us are not billionaires. And we're looking at this and saying, this is how government is now. It's not good. You asked, am I worried about it? Very worried about it.
So thank you very much, Jeffrey Sachs, for this answer. And just to explain you, we have more than one student here. We have altogether, I think, 6 or 7. So they're going to swap seats. And now we have the next student here. What's your name?
Mika.
Okay, Mika, you also brought a question for Jeffrey Sachs for this discussion. What do you want to know?
All right. Hello, Mr. Sachs. So I wanted to know, during your time as a UN advisor, what were like examples of advices that you gave that you feel very proud of looking back, but also the other way around? So what are advices that you gave or misconceptions that you made that you feel when you look back that you probably shouldn't have given?
Yeah. When you're in the activity of giving advice, there's one thing that is a basic thing that most of the time you're ignored. So it's a very interesting activity because sometimes you get listened to, often you get ignored. And probably I've had some good luck with being heard and being proud of the outcome. I spent a lot of time on the 2 big development goals of the UN during the last 25 years, the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I helped work on both of them with the Secretary General of the UN. So I'm very proud of that work. And one thing that I'm especially proud of is trying to solve a particular problem in a practical way, an issue that 20 years ago was very urgent, was that 3 big diseases at the time, malaria, TB, and HIV/AIDS, were just running completely out of control. And I made a recommendation to establish a new global fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And Kofi Annan thought that was a splendid idea, and he was a genius as a diplomat, and he convinced George Bush, the president at the time, to adopt the idea, and suddenly this thing became real, and it has saved, by one count, tens of millions of lives. So I'm very, very proud of that. A lot of time I'm frustrated in terms of what I got wrong. Gosh, I have to think about that. It's the main thing you want when you're trying to solve problems is actually for something to happen. So when something doesn't happen, maybe in all of those occasions you ask, could I have been more practical? Could I have done something politically better? Is there something that I missed? So that kind of feeling, that's pretty much on a lot of issues that I've worked on. And I look back and I say, yeah, I didn't really understand the politics that was at play exactly right. And so I thought something was going to happen, but it didn't happen. So that's pretty much goes with the territory.
Do you have anything like concrete where you felt the way you just described? Just a concrete situation?
You know, one of the things that I spent a lot of time working on that is very real issue now, that I've also spent a lot of time reflecting on, is what happened with the period of Russia's reforms in the early 1990s, because I was very much involved with those when President Mikhail Gorbachev was trying to make reforms in the early 1990s before the end of the Soviet Union. I worked with his economic team. And then when the Soviet Union ended and Russia and the other countries became independent, I worked with Boris Yeltsin's economic team. And it was a very difficult period. And most of what I advised was completely ignored. But one thing in particular that was a very major part of my advice was I was trying to get Europe and the United States interested in helping the Soviet Union and then helping Russia financially. And it didn't work. They weren't interested. And I never understood at that time, 30 years ago, why wouldn't you help? 30 years later, I understand a lot better. My government, the US government, was really nasty. It still viewed Russia as an enemy. Even back in the early 1990s, when Russia was a new independent country wanting to be a democracy, wanting to be part of partnership with Europe and the US, and the US still viewed Russia as an enemy. So that's a period that I think about a lot, because a lot went wrong in those years that shouldn't have gone wrong. And it cast a shadow for a long time afterwards. And we have a war now, which was unimaginable 30 years ago, by the way, because the entire mood in Russia was, we want peace, we want friendship. And I think the United States never really wanted that or understood the opportunity. So that was a period that I think a lot about.
Thank you very much. And while we swapped the chair on my left side to the next student, I would like to show the audience what book we have here. This is also a reason why Jeffrey Sachs is here at Westendverlag. It's called, in German, Diplomatie oder Desaster. Zeitenwende in den USA, ist Frieden möglich? Which is translated, I do that kind of freestyle now, diplomacy or disaster, a big change of time in the US, is peace possible? This is the subtitle of this very great book, and I really recommend it. Everybody who speaks German should really have a look in this book. So
I recommend it too, because of one thing. We have to learn diplomacy again.
And that's
the whole point of this book, which is talk to each other, not just make armaments, make war. We have to escalate, they're evil, but talk to each other. And we forgot that.
And maybe we have some future diplomats sitting here asking questions to a great US economist. So what's your name? And maybe you also say one little sentence about the school that you're from, because we haven't talked about that yet, the Filipinum. Maybe just the place and maybe around how many students there are in your class.
My name is Nicholas. I'm from the Gymnasium Filipinum, as we will call it in German. Our school has roundabout, I would say, 1,000 students. And in our German class, from which we are here, we are about, let's say, 25 or 26 students. And we have this partnership with this place here, with the Verlag, I don't know the name.
Publishing company.
Publishing company, West End. And we are thankful for the opportunity to speak to you, Mr. Sachs.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I want to ask you about a recent comment former President Joe Biden made in his farewell speech. In his speech, he warned the American public about the emergence of a new tech oligarchy in the United States. What is your opinion about this comment?
Yeah, it's one of the few sensible things Joe Biden said during his presidency. And it's a shame that it takes the farewell speech to say something sensible. By the way, it's interesting. The most famous, well, there are two famous farewell speeches in American history. One is George Washington's farewell speech, and he warned America against foreign entanglements. So he said, stay out of European politics, too complicated, too many wars, and we should just stand clear.
When was this, excuse me?
That would have been probably 1796,
Incredible.
if I remember correctly.
He was really like prophetic a little bit.
Yes. Well, he was our first president, and he was a good one. Then the other really famous farewell speech was on January 17th, 1961, which was the speech of Dwight Eisenhower. And he warned against what he called the military-industrial complex. So that's the predecessor to Biden's warning. Again, what's interesting about Eisenhower is he was a general, of course. Then he became president in 1952. And he presided over the growth of the military-industrial complex. And then with 3 days left in his term, he warned us about it. And so maybe he could have warned us about it earlier, but he had a very, he had a very, I think, unlikable, unskilled, or how should I put it, nasty foreign secretary, essentially, who was our Secretary of State, named John Foster Dulles, who was an ardent anti-communist who built up a lot of the military-industrial complex and during Eisenhower's period. And then Eisenhower gave the warning, and Eisenhower's warning was very important. It's true. I quote it all the time. Americans quote it all the time. Now, Biden is saying we have a military technology complex and these mega powerful elites. We all know one of them, Elon Musk, who is really rich and really powerful and an engineering genius, but now sitting at the center of power and worth about $450 billion today as a person. So this is something dangerous for society, that there's so much power concentrated in such few hands. Did Biden do much to address this during his presidency? Not at all. Biden wasted his presidency. He wasted his presidency on war, which I give him a lot of blame for, both Ukraine and in the Middle East, the war in Gaza of Israel, instead of diplomacy, because in my opinion, both wars could have been ended at the negotiating table quickly, and should have been, rather than with so much violence and so much killing continuing to this day. And because the wars continued, it raised the power of these elites. Because if you look at our tech industry, of course it's doing many amazing technological advances, no doubt, but it's also very deeply tied to the Pentagon. These are big contracts going from the Pentagon to Meta, or going from the Pentagon to Amazon Cloud Services, or to Microsoft. They're all intermeshed. And so this is a kind of military tech complex with a lot of very powerful people, a lot of money in the US political system. And the American people are kind of spectators watching this amazing spectacle. and not, I think for a lot of Americans, they don't feel that the political system really responds to them at all. So even if they support Trump and, are happy that he got elected, most people feel that the politicians are off in their own game and not really listening to the public.
In my opinion, he made a good choice by appointing Lina Khan as the FTC chairwoman. Would you agree with this opinion? And what else, in your opinion, should he have done to mitigate the damage that has been done by the oligarchy, or to maybe reverse the trend of a growing oligarchy in the United States?
Yeah, there are two big issues with the plutocracy, with the government by money. First is, the more the U.S. government is like an imperium, the more it is a military state, the more out of control the government is. And the U.S. government, in my view, is to a very significant extent a war state. The U.S. is at war all the time. It's at war in Ukraine. It's at war in the Middle East. Of course, maybe it's not American soldiers, but believe me, it's American missiles, it's American financing, it's American intelligence, it's a lot of American personnel on the ground, even though maybe not in uniform. So these are, to an important extent, American wars. When you're perpetually at war, the government is secret, things are confidential, there's no public oversight over war policy, and so you lose the fiber of democracy. You lose even the habit of democracy. They don't ask our opinion. One day we read, okay, Biden approved firing missiles deep into Russia. This was a couple of months ago. This was after many months where the Pentagon said, no, that's too dangerous. That could lead to a big escalation and so forth. And then the reverse decision was made. When it was made, there was no consultation in our Congress, like the Bundestag, but the U.S. Congress, none at all. There was no public debate. There was no explanation. There was no speech by the president. We don't even know whether Biden could give such a speech exactly right now because he's not in such great shape. But in any event, it was a decision completely of a kind of war cabinet, or not even cabinet, of somebody. I don't know if Jake Sullivan signed it, or Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense, or we don't know where these decisions come from, but they don't come democratically. So this is one risk that I feel. And of course, in Roman history, as I'm sure you've all studied at length, there was a republic and it became an empire. And the senators still walked around in their togas, but they had no power afterwards. And that, I feel, has essentially happened to the United States, that we went from a republic to an empire, and I don't like it. It has meant perpetual war and a loss of accountability. The second thing that happened, I mentioned, is more and more money in our politics. And the wealthy have become so wealthy, it's unimaginable. I mean, who dreamt that one person would have $450 billion of net worth? You can get by just with $1 billion, by the way. You know, you don't need $450 billion. But we have many. I had to even look up the word. I didn't realize it's now in common use, centibillionaires, meaning that you have $100 billion or more. We have many of them now. Come on. They could pay some taxes. They could help solve some social problems more, and so on. And this tendency is still continuing, and that, of course, dramatically diminishes the sense of rule of law institutions and democratic institutions. I don't know if you've studied Aristotle and the Politics, but that's, to my mind, the best book of political science ever written, and it was written 2,300 years ago. And he said, don't allow the inequality to become so big because your government, your society won't function. And that's what's happening to the US right now.
Well, thank you very much also for the nice question. And while we're swapping to the next student, I would like to say that this is a room for free speech. We know that free speech is something on display, not only maybe in the US, but also maybe, or probably very sure, in Europe. So it's very important to just say that we're here. If one of us says something, it doesn't mean that all the others who are in this room are on the same side or have the same opinion. We are here with various opinions, with diverse perspectives and standpoints. And so I'm very...
Let me apologize. If
No.
If there's any misunderstanding, these are my opinions. They're not anyone else's opinions. But just to say, they are formed based on experience and evidence. So they're not flippant opinions.
I'm just saying this also...
I just want to be clear that I don't want anyone to have to feel, oh, God, he said that, because they're just my opinions, but I'm sharing them based on 4 decades of close observation of how these political systems work.
Yeah, I just say this also because we are in 2025, and if we would have been in 2015 or 2010, I probably would have not been in this position to say this, but I feel it's a little bit necessary just for the overall situation. It's nothing to you or to the students. So let's continue. What's your name?
So my name is Ferdinand, and I'm as well as in the Gymnasium Filipino.
So what is your question to Jeffrey Sachs?
So would you consider Israel's treatment of the Palestinian people as genocide regarding the lawsuit, the UN lawsuit initiated by South Africa against Israel?
Yeah. The short answer is yes, because I think what South Africa presented in a very detailed complaint application to the International Court of Justice was sadly very, very credible. And at a technical level, genocide means a violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. And the Genocide Convention gives a number of criteria of what is a genocide, on intent to harm or eliminate a significant proportion of a population. And very sad to say, Israel, and by that I mean the current government in Israel, in my view, is in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. It is led by people who are out to destroy Gaza, make it unlivable, trying to disperse the 2 million people that were there. And now these very days, because of the ceasefire, they're going home to rubble. There's nothing there. There's no homes left. There's no water supply. There are no schools. There are no mosques. There are no clinics. And there are probably, the formal count is about 50,000 dead, but the numbers are probably much higher than that because there are still bodies in the rubble, and because none of that counts the people who died because they didn't have access to food or emergency medical care and so forth. They're not counted in that. So to my mind, this is all shocking. It's taken place on TikTok. In other words, all visible to everybody. And unfortunately, the Israeli government, in my view, is a very extremist government. And a couple of the ministers, one just quit, Ben-Gvir, the other Smotrich, they didn't hide their sentiments. And they gloated at the deaths and the destruction. And we saw a lot of that gloating. As somebody said to us, a historian said to my wife and me recently, that somehow some of these Israeli leaders think that if they speak Hebrew, no one else is listening, but you can have a subtitle underneath and find out what they're saying, and it's pretty awful. So I've been saying from the beginning, because the United States, I believe, has been complicit in this, because it provided the armaments and it provided the funding and it provided the diplomatic cover for this, that the United States could have stopped this any day by saying to Israel, we can't stop you from what you're doing, but we don't have to give you the bombs to do it. And that's what the United States should have done right at the start. And they, of course, they didn't do it. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. So that's the long answer. But the short answer is, I'm sorry to say, I think the answer is yes.
So there's crucial evidence that Israel commits genocide, but why is the US still supporting Israel? Has this something to do with Israel's influence in American politics, or more with the industrial military complex in the US?
More the first. It's a mess. And this is all a historical mess. Part of it, of course, because of Germany and because of the Holocaust. And because of the Holocaust here, the attitude of Jews and Zionists that created the state of Israel was never again. Never again will we allow Jews to be destroyed and so forth. And that ideology can turn into also a kind of horrible response because it became absolutely extreme. Never again means we will do what we want to prevent anyone from threatening us again, and if we have to kill everyone to do it, we're going to do it. That's the extreme response, but there are extremists that took that view. But there was, I think, because of the history, because of the Holocaust, because of the founding of Israel and so forth, there was in the United States support for Israel that became kind of unconditional. So that's one thing that happened. A second thing that happened is that, and it's almost a complete additional track. Some of the strongest supporters of Israel in the United States are so-called Christian Zionists. It's not about the Jewish history. It's not about the Holocaust. It's about the literal reading of the Bible, and not just the literal reading of the Bible, but a particular belief in the end of days. So it is a fundamentalist Christian view in part of the U.S. public, but not a small part, which is that it's very important for the Jewish state to be there so that the end of days can come, so that Armageddon can come, and Armageddon can be followed by the kingdom of God. So if you look at where the political support inside the U.S. for Israel comes from, it's interesting. The Jewish support is absolutely there, but the Christian support is even in larger numbers. This Christian Zionist support, because we have a very strong evangelical Protestant tradition in the United States, and especially in the Republican Party. So this is a second part of the answer to your question of why the support. The third is money, political campaign contributions. The lobby for Israel, and especially something called AIPAC, which is the American Israel Political Action Committee. If I have the acronym right, I apologize if I don't. But AIPAC is how we know it, gives money to people in Congress to run for elections. And if someone votes against Israel, they're targeted in the next election. And by the way, they target Jewish congressmen that don't completely support Israel and everything, and they target anyone that dares to say something against what Israel's doing. And so this is also another element. So there's the history, there's the Christian Zionism, there's the money of campaign contributions, and there is, because of all of this, a basic rule. If you're a congressman, you know in your head, do not oppose Israel. Do not oppose Israel. You don't know why exactly. Maybe it's the Jewish vote. Maybe it's the Christian vote. Maybe it's the money. But it's so deeply trained in the minds of the politicians that when Netanyahu came to the American Congress, even when he's under an arrest warrant for war crimes, they gave him 58 standing ovations in the U.S. Congress. To my mind, really gross. But it shows how American politics is in that direction. But I think there's a final point that's really important. The American people do not agree with this. The overwhelming view of young people in America is, what are we doing? Supporting Israel, killing all these people. It's a huge view. It's shocked the older people, because the older people tend to be pro-Israel. The younger people either against what Israel's doing or actively pro-Palestinian, or both. But in general, the American people don't like what the government is doing. But as I keep saying, no one's asking the American people right now. The government's doing its thing, whether the public likes it or doesn't like it. So it's very concerning.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting, and thank you for your question also. And while we're swapping to the next student, I would like to also say thank you that talking about targeting, we are here in a talk with from a German book publishing company, and we're here with questions of German students towards an American economist, and also very diplomatically, very experienced personality. So the reason why we don't focus now or say anything about what role Germany plays in this big subjects, Israel, Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, is not because we don't have a position or anything. This is just a talk of German students trying to learn, having questions to a very great author of a book. This is the context, just for everybody to understand. And we're very honored that Jeffrey Sachs is here for this talk and also for the next question. So what's your name and what's your question, please?
My name is Yara, and I'm curious because in your book you often mention escalation, and I was just wondering, in case of like a third World War, what would you personally do? And maybe also what would you advise the rest of the world to do, how to deal with that?
The Third World War? Yeah. I would say goodbye. to my loved ones, because that would be the end. We can't have a third world war and expect survival. Albert Einstein was once asked about this. He said, "I don't know how World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." And what he meant by that is that World War III would be the end of civilization, maybe the end of human survival. What we're doing in all our talk about war with Russia, and actually war with Russia and so forth, is bringing the world closer to disaster instead of having diplomacy. And what concerns me more than any single other thing in the whole world, and I'm concerned with a lot of things. I'm concerned with climate change. I'm concerned with poverty reduction. I'm concerned with human well-being in many ways. But the thing that overwhelmingly concerns me about our world is the risk of nuclear war. Russia has 1,600 actively deployed nuclear weapons. The United States has 1,600 actively deployed nuclear weapons. The US and Russia are at war right now in Ukraine. This is madness. This is unacceptable. This is bringing us closer to complete disaster. And when President Putin says, "Don't do such and such, like, don't fire your missiles deep inside of Russia." The US has these long-range missiles called the ATACMS missiles, and Britain has these Storm Shadow missiles, which are similar. Those missiles need American active control for firing. So President Putin says, even if Ukraine fires those missiles, that's actually the United States directly shooting at us. I agree with President Putin on that. That's active US involvement in firing missiles at Russia. And I say, are we out of our minds? What are we doing? Are we grown-ups? Could we sit down and solve this problem rather than bringing us to the brink of nuclear war? So that's my feeling about this. And just to say one thing, that if you really want a terrifying book, but to understand the fragility of what we're facing right now, there was a book written in the United States this past year by an excellent journalist named Annie Jacobson. And the book is called Nuclear War, a Scenario. And look, you guys, I wouldn't want you to have to read this, except that you should read this because it's real. Now, this is a scenario, but it's a scenario based on a lot of declassified information and a lot of good reporting about what would really happen in a nuclear war. And it goes minute by minute. The war's over in 2 hours. And at the end of 2 hours, most of the world's destroyed. And it's one thing that leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And my God, by the time 2 hours is up, the world's over. And that we're not taking this seriously. We should never say, oh, he's just bluffing. We should take seriously when any leader of a country says, this for us is a red line. We should say, okay, we need to sit and negotiate about this to understand what is it that is so frightening to you, or what is your concern? For example, if Putin says it's a red line that NATO not expand to Ukraine, we don't say, oh, that's none of his business. We should say, what is it, President Putin, that is alarming to you about that? To listen. And we don't. We're not doing that. That's what the diplomacy part is about in the book.
So since I got a little sign from backstage that our time is a little bit running out, I would like to return.
I talk too much.
No. Oh, it's really great that we talk at all. It's so interesting, but we all want to give everybody the same chance. So do you have a question back to Jeffrey Sachs?
Yeah, well, if you said earlier that the politics don't really listen to the people anymore. So then what would you want the people to do about it?
Yeah.
How do we influence that if it's like, is it just not in our control anymore?
So with a question of a short answer, please.
You have an election coming up. I would expect, and I would say that the voters should say to the politicians, you must talk to us like grown-ups, not like we're idiots. We need real answers from the politicians, not some silly or ridiculous narrative. And they need to sit down and answer questions in detail. And they don't. But that's their job. And that's what I would hold them accountable for. You sit, you listen, you give serious answers, not glib soundbite answers. In the United States, this is so impossible. Oh, the politicians, they're protected beyond barriers. They don't have to answer anything. They wave to the camera, because they're the bosses. But this is unacceptable for us. And the one thing I want the politicians to be is grown-ups. I want them to behave.
Okay, that's
properly.
a statement. Thank you very much. So let's swap to the next student. And while we sit here, we just address the next question to, what is your name?
Hello, I'm Tim. So are you happy about Trump's re-election?
I am very happy to see the end of the Biden administration. I am very worried about everything about U.S. politics right now. Donald Trump is a very unpredictable person. And in his first term, he did lots of things I strongly disagreed with. And on his first day, he did lots of things I strongly disagree with. He doesn't believe in climate change, but my God, he should go back to, grade 8 to learn about climate change, or grade 9 or 10.
You're talking about the first day this term?
Yeah.
Or the first, yeah.
No,
okay.
I'm talking about the inaugural day, because the first thing he did was say the United States is going to leave the Paris Climate Agreement. How could I be happy about that? But just to say what I'm hoping, it's just a hope because it's not a guarantee, I'm hoping when he says that he's a person of peace, that resonates in his own mind, and that he actually takes diplomatic steps to end the war in Ukraine and to end the war in the Middle East and to avoid a war with China. And to my mind, just very briefly, I know we're running short of time, to end the war in Ukraine, the honesty is to say NATO will not enlarge to Ukraine, because that, from Russia's point of view, is a direct threat to its security. Believe me, Donald Trump would go nuts if China started to set up military bases in Mexico. But that's what the U.S. is proposing to do in Ukraine. So that's number one. In the Middle East, establish a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. That's number two. And in East Asia, disarm, don't have an arms race. That's number three.
Thank you very much. That's it for myself.
Okay, so
thanks.
I think we're done with all the students. Thank you so much for watching us. Thank you so much, Jeffrey Sachs.
Thank
Please.
the students for really great, intelligent questions. You have outdone the politicians for sure. And I really appreciate the chance to meet with all the students.
And we also appreciate not only you watching, but also the Westendverlag for making this talk possible. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Thank you, Jeffrey Sachs. Good luck for your trip through Germany.
Thank you.